The night Sofia Ramirez almost died,
I'm driving right
her
now.
father was miles away, stuck in traffic he couldn't escape, and
What's so
answering
important?
a phone call no parent should ever hear.
Mr. Ramirez, your daughter is crashing and you need to come now.
You need to
What do
come
you mean?
now. For a split
I'm
second,
on my way.
the world around Carlos stopped. The honking horns, the neon reflections on the wet asphalt, the rumbling exhaustion of his old taxi. Everything froze except the sound of his own heartbeat hammering in his ears. He swung the wheel hard, cutting through traffic, tires screeching as the city blurred past him. His breath shook, his hands trembled, and every red light felt like a blade pressed against his throat. When he burst into the hospital parking lot, he didn't even shut the taxi door. He just ran. That was 3 days ago. Now, standing outside room 218 at sunrise, Carlos Ramirez looked like a man aged a decade in a week. Late 30s, short black hair messy from lack of sleep, stubble shadowing a jaw clenched in fear, worn yellow taxi driver jacket hanging loosely on his tired frame. His eyes, dark, hollow, red-rimmed, held the look of someone who used hope like oxygen and was running out of both. Inside the room, Sofia lay motionless, and that terrified him more than the night she collapsed. At least then she fought. Now she simply drifted. He pushed open the door quietly. Sofia, 8 years old and heartbreakingly small in the hospital bed, lay with an oxygen tube under her nose and monitors blinking beside her. Her light olive skin had turned pale, and her wild dark curls clung weakly to the pillow. Tubes wound from her arms like fragile lifelines trying to keep her tethered to the world. Carlos approached her bedside slowly, as though afraid she might vanish if he moved too fast. He sat and gently touched her hand. Her eyelids fluttered open. "Papa." Her voice sounded like dry paper. "Hey, mi estrella," he whispered, brushing her hair back. "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." "You didn't sleep," she murmured. It wasn't a question. He forced a small smile. "Taxi drivers don't need sleep. We run on bad coffee and stubbornness." Sofia tried to laugh, but the sound broke into a sharp cough that bent her tiny body forward. Panic shot through him, but before he could reach for the call button, she relaxed again, breathing shallowly. "Papa," she whispered, eyes drooping. "I dreamed I was flying. And you were there too." Carlos swallowed hard. "Flying?" She nodded faintly. "You didn't look tired. You looked happy." Her voice faded as sleep reclaimed her. Carlos sat there long after she drifted off, staring at the machines keeping her alive. The beeping, steady, artificial, was the only reassurance he had left. A knock sounded softly, and Dr. Helena Moore entered. A white woman in her late 40s, tall, composed, sleek ponytail and pristine white coat. Her presence radiated authority and exhaustion in equal measure. "Morning, Mr. Ramirez," she said gently. "How is she?" Carlos stood, rubbing his face. She didn't wake much." Dr. Moore glanced over Sofia's vitals and sighed. "Her infection is spreading. The antibiotics aren't working anymore." A cold weight settled in Carlos's stomach. "Doctor, what does she need?" Dr. Moore tapped on her tablet. "An advanced immunotherapy treatment. It's highly effective with conditions like hers." Carlos nodded slowly, bracing himself. "How much?" She hesitated, always a bad sign, then spoke quietly. $48,000. Carlos felt the world tilt, as though gravity itself had betrayed him. Doctor, I don't have that kind of money," he whispered. "I'm working double shifts. I know you're trying," she said softly, "but we need payment before the treatment can begin. If we wait too long, she may not respond even if we start later." She placed a hand on his arm, her voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Ramirez, we're running out of time." As she left, Carlos sat back down, completely still, as if movement itself would break him. He stared at Sofia, this tiny piece of his heart lying under sterile white sheets. "I'm not losing you," he whispered. "I won't." But his whisper trembled, because he didn't know how to stop it. When Sofia fell asleep again, Carlos slipped out into the hallway. His legs felt weak as he walked through the hospital, past other parents, other fears, other tragedies, and stepped out into the cold morning air. His taxi sat exactly where he left it, leaning slightly to one side like a tired old friend. The passenger door was dented. The roof light flickered. The paint was peeling in strips. This car had carried him through 12 years of survival, paycheck to paycheck, shift to shift. He climbed in and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. His breath shook. $48,000. He had maybe $400 in his pocket. He had no savings, no credit, no assets, no family to lean on. His wife was gone. Sofia was all he had left, and he was about to lose her, too. He slammed a fist into the dashboard. There has to be a way. But he knew the truth. He'd already asked everyone he could. Friends, co-workers, his boss. Even the bank laughed politely before denying him. He stared out the windshield at the hospital entrance, feeling completely hollow. Then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. He answered. A voice, smooth, calm, dangerous, spoke. Carlos Ramirez. I heard you need money. Carlos's blood ran cold. Who is this? You know who, the voice replied. Come to the garage on 5th. We can discuss a solution to your problem. The call ended. Carlos stared at the phone, breath stuck in his chest. He didn't need to hear a name. There was only one man in the city whose voice carried that much quiet threat. Victor Voss, a man who funded desperation and collected payment in ruined lives. Carlos leaned back, eyes closing. Going to him would destroy everything he believed in. But not going would destroy his daughter. He exhaled slowly. God forgive me, he whispered. And he turned the key in the ignition. Carlos drove toward 5th Street with a feeling that tightened around his ribs like a vice. The city blurred past him, streetlights flickering out, early buses pulling from curb stops, shopkeepers unlocking metal gates. But none of it registered. All he could see in his mind was Sofia's, small hand clutching his. All he could hear was the quiet beeping of the machines keeping her alive. The closer he got to 5th Street, the darker the atmosphere became. It was a part of the city people whispered about, where deals were made in shadows and debts were paid in pain. The kind of place he'd once sworn he would never bring into Sofia's world. He parked outside an abandoned auto garage, its faded sign hanging crooked, metal grates pulled halfway down like bleeding shutters. Graffiti covered the walls. A single light flickered above the side entrance. Carlos stepped out of the taxi. His palms were sweating despite the cold morning air. The door creaked open before he even knocked. A tall man in a black jacket stepped aside without a word. Carlos walked in. The smell hit him first. Oil, rust, and something metallic that made his stomach tighten. Old car parts were scattered everywhere, but the center of the room was cleared out. A worn leather chair sat in the middle beneath a hanging bulb. It looked like a place where confessions and threats shared the same floor. Victor Voss stood behind a metal table, adjusting the cuffs of his charcoal suit jacket like he had all the time in the world. He was in his late 40s, pale, with slicked-back dark hair and sharp cheekbones that made his face look carved from stone. His eyes were the worst part, cold, calculating, as though he looked through people and only saw their worth measured in desperation. Carlos, Victor said, smiling like a shark. I've been expecting you. Carlos's throat tightened. I didn't think you even knew who I was. I know everyone who needs money badly enough to come here. Victor gestured to the chair. Seat. Carlos sat slowly. Victor walked around him, hands clasped behind his back, studying him like a mechanic assessing a broken engine. A taxi driver. Single father. No savings. No assets. No backup. But a very sick little girl. Carlos clenched the chair arms. Please, I don't have time for games. My daughter is dying, Victor finished calmly. Which is why you're here. Carlos's heart hammered. Victor opened a slim silver folder and slid it across the table. Inside was a contract. Thick paper, neatly printed, legal-looking. Carlos didn't touch it. Victor raised a brow. You need $48,000. Immediately. No credit checks. No dilas. No questions. Carlos swallowed. What's the catch? Victor's smile widened. There's always a catch, Carlos. But I'm a reasonable man. My interest is 20%. Carlos blinked. 20% of 48,000? Victor chuckled. No, Carlos. 20% per month. Carlos's breath caught. That's impossible. I can't pay that. Victor shrugged. Then perhaps this isn't the deal for you. Carlos's pulse quickened. Please. I'll work. I'll pay. I just need time. I just need enough to get her treatment started. Victor tapped the contract. There is another option. Carlos hesitated. What option? Victor leaned down slowly, voice lowering to a near whisper. A man owes me a particular favor. A very simple favor. He disappeared somewhere around your neighborhood. I want him found. Carlos frowned. Found? You mean? Victor's eyes glinted dangerously. I'm not asking you to hurt him. Just to tell me where he is. A beat. But if you lie to me, if you warn him if you disappear. His smile sharpened. The consequences will be unpleasant. Carlos felt the cold spread in his chest. You want me to hunt for some criminal? I drive a taxi, I'm not. Precisely. Victor straightened. You know the city. Every alley. Every street corner. Every place a man without options might hide. You see things others overlook. Carlos shook his head. I'm not getting involved in this. Victor sighed, disappointed. Then why are you here? Because Sofia is dying. Because I have no one else. Because the world doesn't care about men like me. Carlos buried his face in his hands, trying to breathe. His thoughts spiraled. Victor watched him silently, predator-like. After a moment, he snapped his fingers. One of his guards placed a brown envelope on the table and opened it. Stacked $100 bills, thick, clean, cold. $48,000. Enough to save Sofia's life. Carlos stared at the money. His heart pounded. His vision blurred. Victor pressed the envelope toward him. Sign the contract. Take the money. Save your daughter. Carlos's hand hovered. Victor's gaze sharpened. Or walk out that door and start planning her funeral. Shock tore through Carlos like a blade. He grabbed the contract. He grabbed the pen. His hand trembled violently. He didn't read a word. He just signed. Victor smiled with chilling satisfaction as he handed over the envelope. Pleasure doing business, Carlos. Carlos clutched the money like a drowning man holding onto a life preserver. He rushed toward the exit, his breath shaking. Carlos! Victor called. Carlos froze in the doorway. Victor tilted his head. Remember, I expect results soon. Carlos stepped outside. The morning sun had risen, but nothing felt bright. His hands shook as he shoved the envelope under his jacket and got into his taxi. His pulse was still racing, panic flooding every nerve. He had done it. He had crossed a line he never thought he would. But Sofia would live. He started the engine and tore out of the alley. Halfway to the hospital, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. A no number. He answered. A trembling voice whispered, Carlos! It's Luis. I heard Victor's looking for me. Please don't tell him where I am. Carlos slammed the brakes in the middle of the road. Shock hit him, so hard he couldn't speak. Luis, his brother. Carlos sat frozen behind the wheel, his heart thundering, so loudly he barely heard the cars honking behind him. His brother's voice, shaking, breathless, echoed through the phone. Carlos, are you there? Please answer me. Luis. The name alone dragged up memories Carlos had buried under years of struggle. Two little boys racing bicycles down dusty alleys, a teenager laughing as he sneaked out at night, a young man slowly losing himself to the wrong crowd. Luis had always been reckless, drawn to danger the way moths chase flames. And now Victor wanted him. Carlos finally found his voice. Where are you? He whispered, words trembling. I can't say. Victor's men are everywhere. I've been hiding for days. I thought maybe you could help me. Carlos closed his eyes, disbelief crashing over him. Of all the people Victor could have named, it had to be his brother. Luis, what did you do? Carlos asked, voice tight. Silence. A painful, heavy silence. Then Luis exhaled shakily. I messed up, Hermano. I messed up bad. Carlos slammed his palm against the steering wheel. Luis, I need to know the truth. I borrowed money from Victor, Luis whispered. I thought I could pay him back. Something easy, something fast, but things got out of control. I couldn't repay him, and now he wants a favor in return. Carlos knew that phrase. A favor, in Victor's world, was never something a man walked away from. Luis continued, voice cracking. I ran, and now he's hunting me. Carlos stared straight ahead at the empty stretch of road, the morning sun blinding through the windshield. Luis, Victor hired me to find you. Luis's breath caught. What? He offered me money. I needed it for Sofia. Carlos's voice broke. I didn't know he meant you. Silence again. Then, softly, how much did he give you? Carlos swallowed. Enough to pay for her treatment. A long pause. Good, Luis whispered. Then keep it. Carlos's head snapped up. What are you talking about? You heard me. Luis breathed shakily. Sofia needs that money more than I need saving. The words hit Carlos like a punch. You want me to let Victor find you? Carlos asked, voice rising with panic. Luis exhaled, tired and defeated. I'm tired of running, Hermano. I'm tired of ruining everything I touch. If this is the price... No, Carlos's voice cracked like glass. No, I'm not choosing between you and her. You don't have a choice. Yes, Carlos whispered, gripping the wheel until his knuckles turned white. Ido. Luis didn't respond, but Carlos heard the quiet sob in his breathing. I'm going to figure this out, Carlos said firmly. But I need to know where you are. No, Luis whispered. Victor will destroy you if you protect me. Let him try, Carlos said, voice low and dangerous. He won't touch my family again. Carlos heard Luis exhale, soft and broken. You were always the strong one, he murmured. Maybe you should have been the younger brother. Before Carlos could say anything, Luis hung up. Carlos sat there, gripping the phone, trembling from the inside out. He had money for Sofia's treatment at last. But now Victor expected results. And the man Carlos was supposed to turn in was his own blood. He raked his hands through his hair, fighting to breathe. Every direction he turned, someone he loved was slipping toward danger. Sofia, Luis, even himself. A horn blared behind him, snapping him back to reality. He pressed the gas and sped toward the hospital. The envelope of money felt like fire under his jacket. Dangerous, unbearable, powerful enough to save or destroy everything. When he reached the pediatric wing, he rushed straight to the billing office, nearly stumbling in his haste. The clerk behind the glass window, a tired middle-aged woman with kind eyes, looked up as he approached. I have the money, Carlos said breathlessly, slamming the envelope onto the counter. Her eyes widened as she opened it. Mr. Ramirez, this is everything. Carlos nodded, chest heaving. Start her treatment. Please. Within minutes, doctors mobilized. Nurses hurried past him. Dr. Moore appeared, her sharp eyes softening with relief. Mr. Ramirez, we'll prepare her immediately. You did the right thing. Carlos sank into a chair, hands trembling. Relief washed over him, so hard he almost couldn't breathe. Sofia had a chance. A real chance. He closed his eyes and let exhaustion seep out of him. For a fleeting moment, he allowed himself to imagine Sofia laughing again, running again, living. But the relief was thin. Fragile. Because his phone vibrated. A new message. From Victor. Update. Did you find him? Carlos's stomach dropped. His fingers trembled. Not yet, he typed back. Victor replied instantly. Hurry. I don't appreciate delays. Carlos shoved the phone into his pocket, suddenly aware of how quickly hope could become terror. As he stood and walked back toward Sofia's room, the world felt split in two. One where his daughter might live, and one where his brother might die. Sofia lay asleep in her bed, small and fragile, the rhythmic beep of the monitor whispering promises of a future. Carlos touched her forehead, gently, fighting the ache in his chest. Papa, she whispered suddenly. Carlos leaned in. Jess, mi estrella. Her eyes fluttered open, hazy with fever. Were you scared? Carlos swallowed. A little. You don't have to be scared, she murmured. You're the bravest person I know. He forced a soft smile. Only because of you. She drifted back to sleep. Carlos turned toward the window, watching the city's skyline shimmer under rising morning light. The world outside looked peaceful, deceivingly peaceful. But Carlos felt it, an invisible clock ticking louder with every second. Victor expected him to deliver a man, his own brother, and the closer he got to saving Sofia, the closer Victor would get to collecting his debt. Carlos stepped into the hallway, jaw tight, eyes burning. He had made a deal with a monster. But he wasn't going to let that monster choose who lived and who died. He was going to choose for himself, even if it meant walking into the lion's den. Carlos left the hospital later than he intended, the weight of everything slowing each step he took toward the parking lot. The sun had begun to set, casting long shadows across the asphalt. His taxi sat beneath a flickering street lamp, its old frame reflecting the orange glow like a weary soldier waiting to be sent back into battle. As he opened the door, he paused. Someone was sitting in the passenger seat. Carlos froze, every muscle tightening like coiled wire. A man stepped out slowly, hands raised in a calm, patronizing gesture. He was tall, wearing a dark hooded jacket, his expression smooth but sharp. "Relax," the man said. "If I wanted to hurt you, I wouldn't be saying hello." Carlos recognized him. Victor's right-hand enforcer, Marcus Hale. A man whose name carried a chill through most of the city's underbelly. Early 40s, lean but built like he'd fought more battles than he cared to remember, with narrow eyes that missed nothing. Carlos didn't move. "What are you doing in my car?" Marcus took a step closer. "Checking in. Victor's waiting." "You're behind schedule." "I told him I'm still looking," Carlos muttered. Marcus's gaze hardened. "And Victor told you there shouldn't be delays." Carlos clenched his jaw. "I just paid for my daughter's treatment. I haven't slept in days. Let me breathe for 1 minute." Marcus tilted his head. "Every minute you breathe, Luis doesn't. Victor wants him. And you're going to get him." Carlos's voice cracked under the strain. "I can't make someone appear out of thin air." Marcus stepped forward, close enough that Carlos could smell the faint scent of cigarettes on his jacket. "Listen carefully, Ramirez. Victor may like clean paperwork and nice suits, but I don't. My job isn't contracts. It's consequences." Carlos felt a stomach twist. "What do you want from me?" Marcus leaned in, lowering his voice. "Find Luis by tomorrow night, or Victor sends me instead." Carlos's breath hitched. Marcus tapped the roof of the taxi twice, almost gently, and walked away without another word. The echo of his footsteps disappeared into the shadows. Carlos stood motionless long after he was gone. Tomorrow night. Victor had given him a countdown. He sank into the driver's seat, hands trembling on the steering wheel. His breath came out in shallow bursts. The dread he had been keeping at bay finally flooded him, thick and suffocating. He started the engine and drove without thinking, the city passing in streaks of neon and darkness. He didn't know where he was going until he found himself in the neighborhood where he and Luis had grown up. Old brick buildings leaned tiredly against one another. Faded murals lined alley walls. The streetlights cast pools of yellow light on cracked pavement. It smelled like memories, like mistakes, like things that never healed. He parked and stepped out, forcing his legs to move even though they felt carved from stone. He walked past the old corner store, now boarded up, past the bus stop where he and Luis once practiced skateboard tricks, past the alley where they had sworn as kids that they'd always protect each other. And then he saw her, an older woman sitting on a worn stoop, wrapped in a knitted shawl. Mrs. Delgado. She had watched Carlos and Luis since they were small. Her gray hair pulled back tightly, her eyes sharp beneath wrinkles shaped by years of worry. She looked up as Carlos approached. "Carlos," she said softly. "I was wondering when you'd come." Carlos stopped, heart thudding. "You've seen him." Mrs. Delgado sighed, glancing around as though the shadows might be listening. "Luis came by 2 nights ago. He looked scared. He asked for food, said he couldn't stay." Carlos felt pain tighten in his chest. "Do you know where he went?" Mrs. Delgado hesitated. "He told me not to tell anyone. Said he didn't want to drag you into his mess." Carlos sank onto the step beside her. "It's too late for that." She studied him carefully. "You're in trouble, Mijo." Carlos rubbed his face. "I made a deal. A bad one. And now they're going to hurt him if I don't bring him in." Mrs. Delgado placed a warm, wrinkled hand on his. "You're a good father. A good man. But this world, it doesn't play fair." Carlos closed his eyes. "Do you know where he is?" She seemed torn between compassion and fear. Then she whispered, "He's hiding in the old train yard. The warehouse, near the rusted water tower." Carlos stood abruptly. "Thank you." She caught his wrist before he could take a step. "Be careful. Men like Victor don't forgive or forget." Carlos nodded. "I know." He walked back to the taxi, but dread twisted his gut with every step. The train yard was quiet, isolated, dangerous. If Luis was there, he was cornered already. Carlos drove fast. Too fast. His knuckles whitened on the wheel. When he reached the old industrial lot, he parked at a distance, heart pounding so loudly it drowned out the engine's rumble. The warehouse stood dark and hollow against the night sky, the rusted water tower looming like a broken sentinel. Faded graffiti peeled from the walls. The place smelled of dust, rust, and abandonment. Carlos stepped inside through a broken side door. "Luis," he whispered into the darkness. His voice echoed back at him. He moved deeper, past stacks of wooden pallets, old metal drums, scraps of forgotten machinery. The darkness felt alive, breathing with him, waiting. Then he heard it. A soft shuffle. Footsteps. "Luis," he said louder. A figure stepped out from behind a stack of crates. Luis Ramirez, early 30s, scruffy beard, dark circles beneath exhausted eyes, looked nothing like the carefree younger brother Carlos remembered. His clothes were dirty, torn. His hands shook. "Carlos!" Luis's voice broke. "You shouldn't have come." Carlos felt his heart splinter. "You're my brother." "Of course I came." Luis shook his head, backing away. "No. Victor's men will follow you. If they find me, if they find you." Carlos stepped forward. "Luis, listen to me. I'm not turning you in. But you have to trust me. We have to figure this out." Luis laughed, but it was empty, hollow. "Figure this out? Brother, you don't understand. Victor doesn't let people go. Ever." Carlos swallowed. "I know." Luis stared at him, eyes wet and fearful. "Then why are you here?" Carlos's voice cracked. "Because I'm done running. And I'm done losing family." Luis pressed a trembling hand to his face. "You're going to get yourself killed." Before Carlos could respond, a sound echoed from the entrance. Soft, steady, boot steps. Carlos and Luis locked eyes. Dread surged between them like a shockwave. Someone else was inside the warehouse. And they weren't alone anymore. The boot steps echoed through the hollow warehouse, slow, measured, deliberate. Each step tightened the air, making the silence press harder against Carlos's ribs. He grabbed Luis's arm and pulled him behind a stack of crates. The shadows swallowed them. A single beam of light swept across the room. Marcus. He moved with calm certainty, a flashlight in one hand, the other resting near the inside of his jacket where a gun likely waited. His voice carried easily through the cavernous space. "Carlos!" he called, tone almost conversational. "You didn't think Victor wouldn't follow you, did you?" Carlos's breath caught. Beside him, Luis trembled uncontrollably. Marcus walked deeper into the warehouse, the beam of his flashlight skimming over crates, pillars, discarded tools. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't searching. He was stalking. "Victor hoped you'd be smart," Marcus continued. "But here we are. You found your brother. Now bring him out." Carlos clenched his teeth. Luis whispered, barely audible, "We have to run." Carlos shook his head. "He'll shoot us before we reach the door." Marcus stopped walking. Silence stretched, long, heavy, dangerous. Then Marcus said, "You have 10 seconds. After that, I stop being polite." Luis brachuderat. Carlos grabbed his shoulders. "Luis, look at me." Luis lifted his eyes, haunted, desperate. "You trust me," Carlos whispered. Tears glistened in Luis's eyes. "Always." Carlos nodded once. "Then follow my lead. No questions." Luis nodded. Marcus called out, "5 seconds, gentlemen." Carlos inhaled, steadying himself. Every instinct screamed that this was madness, but he saw no other path. And Sofia needed him alive. Luis needed him alive. He stood. Marcus spun toward the movement, flashlight pinning Carlos in the beam like a trapped animal. "There you are." Carlos raised his hands. "Leave him out of this. I'll come with you. I'll work off every cent." Marcus tilted his head. "Generous. But it's not your debt." Luis stepped out from behind the crates. "It is mine." Marcus smiled faintly. "Good. Saves me trouble." Carlos stepped between them instantly. "You're not touching him." Marcus sighed, as though annoyed by the inconvenience. "Carlos, you signed the contract. Victor owns your time now. And Luis, Well, Victor owns his life. Carlos's hands curled into fists. What if I offer something better? Marcus blinked once. There is nothing better. There is. Carlos took a step closer. Me. Marcus stiffened. Carlos kept going. Luis is unpredictable. Reckless. He'll run, fight, resist. He's trouble. You know it. But me? I am steady. I work. I follow through. I do what I say. I'm worth more to Victor alive than Luis is dead. Luis Bratisha. Carlos. No. Carlos cut him off with a small shake of his head. Marcus studied him in silence, weighing the offer. Carlos could practically hear the gears turning, calculating profit, risk, usefulness. After a long, tense moment, Marcus spoke. Victor doesn't trade. You know that. Carlos took another step. Then let's make a new rule. One time. Just this once. I walk into Victor's world voluntarily, and I work for him until every penny is repaid. Luis grabbed his arm. Carlos, don't do this. Carlos whispered without looking at him. Go. Live your life. Make it worth something. Marcus raised an eyebrow. And what guarantee do I have you won't disappear like he did? Carlos pulled out his phone. Because I'll call Victor myself. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Go on. Carlos dialed Victor's number. The ring cut through the room. Luis stared. Horrified. Marcus stood poised, ready to intervene. Victor answered with cold calm. Carlos! I assume you have good news. Carlos forced his voice steady. I found him. Luis's breath broke. Victor hummed thoughtfully. Excellent. Marcus will bring him. No. Carlos interrupted. You're taking me instead. Silence. Then Victor spoke, voice dangerously soft. Explain. Carlos swallowed. You want someone reliable? Someone useful? Someone who won't run? Take me. I'll do the job. Whatever you want. But my brother lives free. Luis whispered. Please don't. Victor was silent for several long seconds. Carlos's heart pounded. So hard he thought Victor must hear it through the phone. Then Victor sighed. Marcus. Put the gun away. Marcus blinked, surprised. Victor continued. Carlos, you interest me. You keep your word. You face your mistakes. Perhaps you're right. You are far more valuable alive than your brother is dead. Carlos's legs nearly buckled. Victor finished. Bring Carlos to me. Luis Guokes. The call ended. Luis collapsed against Carlos, shaking. You idiot. You stupid idiot. Why would you do that? Carlos held him tightly. Because you're my brother. And because Sofia needs you if anything happens to me. Luis broke down, sobs shaking through him. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Carlos squeezed his shoulder. Then prove me right. Change. Start over. Live. Marcus stepped forward. Time to go. Carlos turned to Luis, cupping the sides of his face like when they were kids. Listen to me. Go to the hospital. Stay with Sofia. Tell her stories. Make her laugh. Give her something to wake up for. Luis shook his head violently. I won't let you do this alone. Carlos touched his forehead to his brother's. You have to. Marcus grabbed Carlos's arm, pulling him gently but firmly. Luis reached out instinctively, but Carlos shook his head again. As Marcus led him away, Carlos looked back one last time. Luis stood in the shadows, devastated. But alive, Carlos stepped into the night. The air felt cold, final, heavy with fate. Marcus opened the back door of an unmarked black car. Carlos hesitated only once. Sofia's smile flashed in his mind. Her soft voice, her tiny hands, her laugh, he prayed he would hear again. He got into the car, and for the first time that night, he didn't feel afraid. He felt certain. If this was the price of saving the two people he loved most, he would pay it. Fully, without regret. As the car pulled away from the warehouse, Luis's voice echoed in his memory. You're the bravest person I know. Carlos looked out the window at the city lights. No, he whispered. I'm just a father. And finally, after days of drowning, Carlos felt something he hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. Kindly subscribe, like and share to your loved ones. Thank you.